Welcome back to Proxamer, everybody, and today we're going to be talking about the Eldar Autarch and what are the best ways to equip your Eldar Autarch in a competitive scene. So the Autarch is actually one of the most customizable models in the Eldar Codex, and as such, it has a lot of different options, and this may leave a lot of players wondering what they should give their Autarch to be the most effective. So we're going to kind of dive into the different options and talk about what the Autarch offers for each kind of loadout. So there's two types of Autarch that you can get, one on foot and one on jet bike. And the jet bike one is called the Sky Runner. So essentially, they have a lot of different weapon and war gear options. They have a 4+ invul save, which is really good. It's basically gives them survivability on par to a Farseer. They have great stats across the board. They hit on 2s with both shooting and in close combat. They have a lot of attacks. They have, a good number of wounds, decent save, good movement, etc. The only thing they don't have good, to be honest with you, is their toughness because, they're space elves. They're kind of squishy. And they have 2 powerful army special rules. So these aren't just beat sticks that you could just throw into combat and expect to do well, like, captains or something like that. They actually have some really cool army special rules as well. And these are the 2 roles that all Autarchs have. It's the Superlative Strategist and the Path of Command. So the Path of Command is extremely good, and it basically works as both a ranged and melee pseudo-guide, essentially. Essentially, any Eldar core unit within 6 inches can reroll 1s to hit with both melee and range attacks. So this is obviously very powerful, because it allows you to buff units as you come in. And this works extremely well with multiple small units. So, sometimes what Guide lacks is it lacks effectiveness on smaller units because you don't always want to cast Guide on a unit of 5 of something, you know what I mean? But with this ability, this allows you to get, it's not as powerful as Guide, but it's kind of like a pseudo reroll to your attacks. And we'll talk about their uses later on when we talk about the different types of Autarch you could possibly have, but it works really well when used in conjunction with your friendly troops, obviously. Now, the other ability is called the Superlative Strategist, and this allows you to use an extra command reroll each phase. So normally you'd only get 1 reroll each phase, 1 command reroll in movement, 1 command reroll in the psychic, 1 command, etc., right? So this allows you to do 2 instead of 1. Now, these do cost command points, but this is really useful because, a lot of the times, and you guys will have had this, you'll have really bad turns of rolling, right? And it'll just seem like essentially you're just having a really bad dice day. Well, this allows you to kind of make up for that a little bit. And instead of, just 1 command reroll, you can get 2 command rerolls per phase. So pretty useful, especially if you're having a bad turn. It can help you get some value out of your bad turn. Despite you rolling bad. So, and here's the thing about command rerolls. A lot of people, when they get into the game, they don't immediately look at this, but what a command reroll basically does, and this is available for all armies, not just Eldar, but it allows you to reroll a hit, wound, save, charge, psychic test, deny the witch, damage, advance, and even the number of attacks a weapon gets. So it's basically a catch-all of rerolls. It basically covers almost everything that you could think of. Now, let's look at the first type of Autarch. It's the Autarch on foot. It's 80 points base, so already we're looking at its base cost. It's very good. It comes with a Shrieking Pistol and a Starglaive and Plasma Grenades, but honestly, you probably will never use those. Pretty decent stat line, 2+ to hit in both combat and at range. 5 wounds, which is decent, but it's typical for Eldar, and 5 attacks. And the Autarch has a number of war gear options, so we're just going to kind of go through them one by one here. The 2 options that for the helmet, which immediately stand out, are the Howling Banshee Mask and the Manda Blasters. So what a lot of people will do is they'll put Manda Blasters because Manda Blasters on 6s to wound cause 1 additional mortal wound, but I would actually refrain from using this, and I think a lot of competitive players won't use this. They'll actually use the Howling Banshee Mask, and here's why. yes, the Mandiblasters gives you additional wounds, but you're probably only going to get one mortal wound out of it a turn, and that's great, don't get me wrong, that's going to make up its points worth. But with a Howling Banshee Mask, you can use that to deny Overwatch or set to defend, and the Autarch makes a great support model. The Autarch makes a great model to go in with you, kind of support your squad, charge in with your Striking Scorpions, charge in with your Shining Spears. And these are both units that, would actually get really wrecked by certain enemies. So let's say you're going against an enemy with a lot of flamers, but you need to assault that unit. Well, guess what? You're probably going to lose over half your squad if you charge into heavy flamers. With the Autarch, you can negate this for just 5 points, just the Banshee Mask. You can negate this by denying enemy Overwatch. You can charge in first, deny them their Overwatch, and make that much harder for the enemy to kill you. And this will, buff any combat, and it actually has much more value than Mandiblasters, because if somebody Overwatches you and kills, 2 models in Overwatch, well, that's going to be worth a lot more than you just getting 1 extra mortal wound on average per turn. And even then, it's not guaranteed that you're going to get that mortal wound, because you need an unmodified 6. So it's a little hard to do, especially with just 5 attacks. You have to hit first, and then you have to wound, and you have to get a 6 to wound. So you probably have around a 60% chance, give or take, to actually get a mortal wound each round of combat. So it's not actually that effective in my mind. The Howling Banshee Mask has a lot more utility and can basically be used as a pseudo Howling Banshee squad. Howling Banshees are really good at denying Overwatch as well. And in a lot of lists, it could be used to deny, very shooty units the ability to do that. And then next up, we have the Autarch Jump Generator, or just the Warp Jump Generator. This gives the Autarch a movement of 12, gives them the same ability that Warp Spiders have, which is 2d6 Battle Focus move, which is pretty good, and it gives them Sudden Assault. So Sudden Assault is the really important thing here, because it allows the Autarch to, kind of drop in with other units that are using Sudden Assault. So, for example, if you're using a couple of Falcons with Cloud Strike and you want to drop the Autarch in as well with Sudden Assault, you can do this with the Autarch Jump Generator. Now, here's my take on the Autarch Jump Generator, though. Unless you are kitted out for shooting, the 2d6 Battle Focus really isn't that good. Because the Autarch, pretty much, if he can get into combat, you want to move him into combat. And if you don't want him in combat, you're probably not going to give them an Autarch Jump Generator, but there is a build where you can use it. It's just more of a fun thing. So I think the Autarch Jump Generator is good, but I do think it's a little expensive. And I think the next option that Autarchs can take instead is generally going to be more widely used, which is the Swooping Hawk Wings. So it is great for a hit and run, though. I have to admit that. If you're using a hit and run Autarch, it's perfect. So Swooping Hawk Wings are a little less expensive. They're 15 points. It gives you greater movement characteristic of 14 versus 12. You gain Jump Pack and Fly, and you gain the Sudden Assault ability. So it's essentially the same in a lot of ways as the Autarch Jump Generator, but it has a little more movement. It doesn't have the Battle Focus, but instead you gain the Jump Pack and Fly abilities, and it's a little bit cheaper. And this extra movement is really going to help you kind of be able to get into combat much easier. It's going to help you fly over terrain and things like that. Now, the thing about the fly keyword, though, is that it can be a liability in some cases if enemies have abilities that specifically give bonuses versus targets with fly. So you do have to watch out for that. But it is a little bit cheaper, and if you're dropping in with other units to benefit from it, Path of Command ability, from the Autarch's Path of Command ability, then it's a great strategy. It's a great thing to put on an Autarch. And in fact, I would recommend almost in most cases, if you're going to be deep striking units, put Swooping Hawk Wings on your Autarch. It's not very expensive, and it'll allow you to get where you need to be, and it'll allow him to kind of go in reserve and be safe for the first turn so that your enemy can't just shoot him off the board. turn 1. Now, the Autarch does have access to quite a few weapons. And if we look at him here, we have the Banshee Blade, Death Spinner, Dragon Fusion Gun, and Fusion Pistol up first. And I have to admit, the first thing on the list is the Banshee Blade, and this is obviously the worst choice when compared to the other weapons. In fact, the only reason you would ever take a Banshee Blade is probably just to replace it with a relic. Like, for example, if you wanted to take the Fire Saber. But the Banshee Blade is worse than the Starglaive in almost every respect, except for AP. So I don't really like the Banshee Blade too much. I personally wouldn't take the Banshee Blade. Now, the Death Spinner can be effective at taking out light infantry and stuff like that. But again, I don't find it that effective on the Autarch, mainly because it's random. It's D6 shots. And when you have units like Warp Spiders, which have multiple models, the D6 shots, the randomization of that, isn't that bad. But what is bad is if you have it on a single model, you could roll a 1 and just kind of not do anything that turn. So that's kind of, in my opinion, not that good. And it costs 10 points, and really for 10 points, you're not getting that much damage out of it. Now, on the other hand, the Dragon Fusion Gun is very effective. So you can pop off shots at tanks. You can pop off shots at characters, and it's really nice on the Autarch because he hits on 2s. And typically, when you have single shot weapons like this, hitting on 2+ is really important because you don't want to miss that shot. And same thing with the Fusion Pistol. Although the Fusion Pistol has less range, it can also technically be fired in close combat. So both of those options are great on the Autarch. Personally, I think that they're the better options for ranged weapons. And again, it doesn't hurt to have an extra weapon in your army that can cause a lot of damage to tanks. Especially with a command reroll, because, technically, if you shoot this at a vehicle, for example, and you roll a bad damage roll, well, you can use a command reroll to make that even higher. So not a bad setup there as far as a ranged weapon. So either a Fusion Pistol or Dragon's Fusion Gun, I think, are really both really good choices. Personally, though, I like the Dragon's Fusion Gun a little bit better because of the range. Now, the next two weapons are the Reaper Launcher and the Scorpion Chainsword. The Reaper Launcher is an interesting weapon on an Autarch. So the reason why is because it has a lot of range, it has pretty good damage, and it has 2 different firing modes. So I actually like pairing this with a Warp Gem Generator, but I have to be honest with you. I don't think the Reaper Launcher is the best choice on an Autarch because you get -1 to hit for moving and shooting. And the Autarch is always going to be moving and shooting. So in my opinion, it's okay, but it's not the best because it is -1 to hit. And typically you're not going to need all that range on an Autarch model. It's a little bit overkill. You're going to be pretty fast anyway, and you're going to be able to get into grips with the enemy anyway because of sudden assault, because you're going to be in a transport, stuff like that. So I think the Reaper Launcher is only really for specific Autarch builds and not really for most Autarch builds out there. It leaves a lot to be desired as far as that goes. Now, the Scorpion Chainsword is okay. I think it pairs well with Manda Blasters, thematically. And rules-wise, because, it does give an additional attack. This pairs well with Manda Blasters, which basically means that, attacks on 6s to wound do a mortal wound in addition to everything else. But I still think it's less effective than the Banshee Mask and Starglaive combination. So I think the Starglaive is still way better. The Starglaive is just better in almost every way to this. The one attack doesn't really make up for it all. Now, look at the Starglaive, okay? Now, I think the Starglaive is probably one of the better weapons in the entire codex. It has a good strength. It's ×2, so that means that you are basically getting strength 6. Really good AP, -3 AP isn't bad, and it has damage too. It's the perfect Space Marine killer, and it also is great at killing other multi-wound targets, and it doesn't really lose any effectiveness versus hordes. It doesn't have any negative modifiers to hit. It doesn't have any of that. It doesn't say -1 attack when you make attacks with this weapon. It's just better in most ways to the Banshee Blade and the Scorpion Chainsword. More strength than the Scorpion Chainsword and Banshee Blade. More AP than the Scorpion Chainsword, but slightly less than the Banshee Blade, and more damage. So I think, and in combat especially, AP is useful, but it's not going to be as useful for melee weapons as shooting weapons, because remember, if I charge into a unit of Space Marines, and I'm negating 3 of their armor, they're only getting a 6+ save. Now, with the Armor of Contempt, they're going to get a 5+. Okay, fair enough, right? They're going to get a 5+ save against damage. But I'm going to cause 2 damage every time I score a successful wound. If I have a Banshee Blade, yeah, they're getting a 6-up save versus a 5-up, but they're only going to be dealing 1 wound. Or, excuse me, I'm only going to be dealing 1 wound per successful attack. So the trade-off isn't great. They're both 0 points. It's not like you have to pay a lot of extra points for the Starglaive. So you might as well take the Starglaive. I think this is probably, GW saying, we really want you to model the, the Autarch that you buy with the new Starglaive we gave you guys, basically. So, yeah, I think the Starglaive probably the best close combat option. Now, let's look at the Autarch Skyrunner. So the Autarch Skyrunner is slightly more expensive, and it benefits from more movement, 1 more toughness, 1 more wound, and it gets a laser lance base and a twin-linked or twin shuriken catapult, which is a pretty good ranged weapon. So that's pretty awesome. It gets a lot of bonuses. Here's the thing about the Autarch Skyrunner, though. Sadly, it can't take a lot of options. So it has the Banshee Blade, which is worse in every way to the laser lance. So you don't want the Banshee Blade. The only reason you'd really have a Banshee Blade is to trade it out for relics. So something like the Fire Saber. That's the only reason you'd ever take a Banshee Blade, is to trade it out. The Dragon Fusion Gun is an okay choice, but unfortunately on the Skyrunner, it replaces the laser lance, which is by and above the best weapon on the Autarch on Jetbike on the Skyrunner. So you don't really want a Dragon Fusion Gun, unfortunately. Now, the laser lance is basically the only weapon you have access to, but it's amazing. It has a great profile for both melee and shooting. It has strength 6, AP -4, damage 2 on the charge. You're going to be pretty much charging every turn. And it has a pretty decent ranged attack as well that you can use. So it's not a bad weapon overall, really good, in fact, and it'll get you a lot of damage. Now, the thing about the Skyrunner is obviously you can't have a Banshee Mask or Manda Blasters, which really sucks. I felt that they should have added this to the Skyrunner. I don't see why there was any reason why they had to exclude it. I understand the models, the Skyrunner model doesn't have that. But with all the new Autarch kit options that we've had in the past and that we have now, I don't see any reason why they couldn't have just accepted it and, said, hey, you can give a Manda Blaster or a, Howling Banshee Mask to this guy, and you have to buy 2 kits or something like that. I mean, that makes money for GW, right? So I don't know why they didn't do that. I don't even think it's broken, to be honest with you. I thought maybe it's broken if they do that, but I don't even think that's what it is. I think they were just going based off a model perspective, that the Skyrunner model doesn't come with those heads. But it's a shame. The Skyrunner is very strong still, though. And it is worth taking a lot, because I think there's a lot of great relics and stuff like that you can take with the Autarch that are absolutely amazing, especially if he's on a jet bike. So I really think this option is really worth taking still. And so when we're talking about which loadouts work the best with the Autarch, I think there's a couple of things that really work well that you're going to see in most lists that take an Autarch. So you're going to see the Autarch Skyrunner with just the basic laser lance. That's, in my opinion, the best general loadout for an Autarch. You're also going to see Autarchs with Banshee Mask, Dragon Fusion Gun, and Starglaive, and this is kind of a basic loadout as well that goes into transport. and will be dropped off with units using, mobile fighters or some other ability like that to give them buffs to hit. You're going to see an Autarch with a Warp Gem Generator or a Swooping Hawkwing, either one, with the Banshee Mask, Dragon Fusion Gun, and Starglaive using Surprise Assault. So this is to come down with things like Swooping Hawks, Warp Spiders to give them a little bit of a bonus to hit, and also just provide them support. And then lastly, you're going to see an Autarch with Reaper Launcher, Banshee Mask, Warp Gem Generator, and Starglaive. And this is kind of more of a fun ranged variant that could be used to support backline units like Dark Reapers. I don't think this is that good and that effective, but in fun games, I think you'll be able to see this using the Reaper Launcher because it can jump in and out of cover, in and out of line of sight with the Warp Gem Generator and the Reaper Launcher for, a little bit of fun. But basically, you're probably not going to see that in competitive play. Now, some of the best relics to pair with the Autarch are the Aegis of Eldanesh. So that gives a 2+ save and -1 damage. That's fantastic, especially the -1 damage. Helps keep your Autarch alive, especially with the Warlord trait, Fate's Messenger, which can negate damage altogether. So really good ability, helps him survive a lot, especially when he's capturing objectives. And then you have Sunstorm, which is a special jet bike that gives you movement 20 and objective secured. Absolutely necessary for competitive play. Remember, if you have an Autarch and he's surviving into the late game, you're going to want to use him to capture objectives, and having objectives secured is a great way to take objectives away from an opponent who only has one model on an objective, or any models on an objective for that matter, that aren't objective secured. So a great way of stealing points from your opponent in the late game without him even realizing, him or her. The Phoenix Gem is really good too. Basically, the first time your Autarch dies on a 2+, at the end of the phase, you can return him with D3 wounds. Makes him harder to kill for sure. And especially paired again with Fate's Messenger makes the Autarch really tough to kill for an opponent. So really good ability as well. Of course, if you roll that 1, you're out of luck. But hey, dice gods be praised or be damned. That usually happens in 40k. And then lastly, if you want to go for more damage, the Fire Saber is a good choice. Basically what it is it's a permanent laser lance, essentially. Well, not quite as good, but +3 strength, -4 AP, D2 wounds, or damage 2, and then mortal wounds on 6 is the hit. So not a bad weapon overall, and it would replace the Banshee Blade on the Autarch. So I think in conclusion, the Autarch on foot is a great option for being in a transport, or you can use it with Sudden Assault, with Swooping Hawkwings or a Warp Gem Generator to support your Aspect Warriors, whether they be Dire Avengers in transports or Warp Spiders deep striking in or Swooping Hawks or whatever you have. The Autarch on foot is a great option for this. The Autarch Skyrunner is also fantastic for covering multiple roles. And this, this is powerful damage. This is support for your units going into combat or shooting, and mix that in with objective control. The downside to the Skyrunner, obviously, is you can't take the Banshee Mask, and your options as far as weapons and things like that are rather limited. So you can't take a lot of the stuff with the Skyrunner, but the upside is you can, have things like the Sunstorm relic, which gives you objective secured movement 20 and is probably one of the most powerful relics in the Codex as far as objectives and tournaments and competitive play goes. And I know it may not seem like a lot. Oh, movement 20, 4 extra inches of movement, objective secured. But trust me, once you're playing, you'll see what I mean. The Autarch is very hard to kill with the right combination. Fate Messenger. And remember, you can also use stratagems to give extra Warlord traits or relics to your Eldar. It's only a couple of command points. So if you really want another relic or Warlord trait and you don't have it already, really consider using that stratagem, burning through a few command points in the beginning of the game to give your other units, your other HQ units or, etc., different war gear options. Okay, everybody, that's it for today. I hope you guys learned something from this video, and hopefully, there's some people bringing Autarchs out there. All right, see you next time. And also just a quick thanks to everybody supporting the channel. I hope to come out with more content every day. And peace out, everybody. See you later.